Professor Charny, it is a great pleasure to have you here in Armenia, and thank you for your time and for agreeing to this interview. And thank you very much for all the work that you have done on the subject of Armenian genocide. It is highly appreciated. The first question I would like to ask you is how you personally got involved in this particular issue of the Armenian genocide, and why is it important for you, both as a person and as an academician?
Thank you for a beautiful question, because you've already combined being a human being and being a scholar.
Yes.
The story of the Armenian genocide begins with begins with an article I read whose title was The Unremembered Genocide. It was in a magazine called Commentary Magazine, which is published by the American Jewish Committee, and therefore is identified with American Jewish thinking, but it was a major intellectual piece for all people. And I read it regularly, and one day there's an article by a lady called Marjorie Hosepian, whom I later got to know very well and became friends with a lot. And I was amazed that I did not know anything about it, and I kept that in my head and my heart for a few months. And one day at a psychiatric hospital where I was a consultant, because my basic profession is a practicing psychologist, there was a day of a professional meeting, and by chance a Turkish psychiatrist, a man, and a Turkish psychologist, a lady,
Yes.
came as guests. And by chance, it wasn't planned,
Yeah.
they sat next to me, so I was a gracious host. And in the breaks, in the coffee, at lunch, I spoke with them. I kibitzed with them. That's an American Jewish expression of small talk.
Okay.
And we're friends, right? And we're colleagues in mental health, right? In the afternoon coffee session, I remembered the article by Marjorie, and I said, I wanted to ask you something. I read recently about what the Turks did to the Armenians, and I'd like to understand more about it. Within 1 second, both of them turned their backs to me, did not say a word, and never spoke to me again.
How interesting. Wow.
From that day, I was a student of the denial of the Armenian genocide.
That was the first lesson that
A big
you
lesson.
encountered.
Yeah.
You have why is it important to address the question of Armenian genocide today?
Yeah.
Recognition and reparation.
Without hurting any Armenian, every genocide is important. And every one of them involves the same calamity of human beings being destroyed. The Armenian genocide is of enormous importance, first of all, for the dignity and honor of the Armenian people. And we should all participate in honoring all other people. And secondly, the Armenian genocide, like all genocides, is a voice into what's happening now in the world and what's going to happen in the future of our world, because genocide has not ended.
Yeah.
It's not an event of the past alone. It is an event that human beings do now and will be doing until we develop the tools for stopping it.
Right.
There are murderers in this world. They're called governments, they're called political parties, they're called revolutionary movements. Every group that takes on itself killing civilians who are not armed is committing genocide. Now, in addition, the Armenian genocide is of a people whom I've gotten to love, and many people do. You have a culture that has a beauty to it. It has a message to it, a music to it. And so there's a special personal interest as well in the history of the Armenian genocide.
Oh, thank you. As we know, the Jewish people are the ones who have managed to get reparations, the only ones who suffered genocide and got reparations. I just wonder what lessons can we learn from this experience, because for us it's important to know what we can learn from it.
Well, the first lesson is if you have your genocide committed by the Germans, you have a better chance of getting reparations than if you have your genocide committed by the Turks. And how to apply that lesson practically, I am not completely sure. But I totally support the increasing pressure in every possible way, in every legal way, towards getting reparations.
Yeah.
I remember very well the beginning of Armenian efforts to collect the memory. And at that point, the Armenian people didn't have the power to demand any actual reparations.
Yes.
But the time has passed already. We together have the power. And we should be using it in every international law and diplomatic situation, demanding reparations.
Right. After the Holocaust was recognized, there is a legal term, anti-Semitism, and it is, in many countries it is punished, that anti-Semitism. My question is, how do the people who have suffered genocide after this event, when xenophobia is applied to them and anti-Semitism, anti-Armenianism, how to tackle these questions? Because today, as we know, in Azerbaijan there is a huge proportion of anti-Armenianism, and to me it is a danger. So I want to ask your opinion as a scholar. What is the danger of having the anti-Armenianism, especially considering that the Armenians were victims of genocide?
Yeah, the answer is that any time a message of hate and of derogation, that means insulting a given ethnic people, religious people, even political people, anytime there's a message of concentrated hate that becomes official, that becomes widespread, that's promoted by the radio and television, by government officials, by a culture, that is the invitation to the virus of genocide.
There's a direct link.
Absolutely a direct link.
Any way to combat that?
Well, the way to combat it has never really been tried, in my judgment. And that is that all the people in the world who have suffered genocide together, and other good people, and there are millions, need to create a new culture through music, through art, through education, through the media, where the message we put across is that life is holy, and that all human beings have a right to live. And that's why I've proposed a creation of an organization, a worldwide organization of the survivors of all genocides, not separately, but together.
That what might create a new power in that sense?
Yeah.
You have done a lot of work on the issue of denialism, the denial of genocide, particularly by Turks, and not only by Turks. What are the new trends of denialism?
Denial is quite amazing. No matter how much evidence you accumulate, and you have, the deniers will come and say it doesn't exist. One sloppy form that I heard a lot of at a conference in Turkey is those documents are forgeries. Which documents? The court-martial of the perpetrators of the Armenian Genocide, because there's a period where the Turkish military themselves conduct a court-martial and convict their key killers. Books like Ambassador Morgenthau's diary are a forgery. That's one kind of strategy. Another one that I've written about in a new journal published by the Armenian Genocide Memorial Museum and Institute is a book by a scholar who brings all the information about the Armenian Genocide and names all the respected scholars who say there was an Armenian genocide, and at the same time proceeds to say, well, it was only a minor number of people. It was in the course of a war. It wasn't purposeful. And it's time that the Armenians forgave the Turks and joined together in a good future. So the denial has moved from being sloppy and stupid in an open way to being smart and sophisticated. And if you go to a dinner party with somebody like that or read a book like that in isolation and you have no background, you start thinking, well, there must be something to it.
But still there is a consensus in among scholars that the genocide happened. The question is not disputed anymore among the scholarly community as such.
You're interviewing me, and yet I'm going to say to you, the way you asked that question, I heard you being afraid that there isn't a consensus. And that's what happens to us minority peoples and victim peoples. It takes years until we get sure of ourselves. There is a consensus. It's a strong consensus. The idiots and the deniers and the liars are still there and always will be, because they're people whose minds work in twisted fashions just like the genociders do. But the consensus is now overwhelming.
And one final question, would you say a couple of comments about the forum that was held in Yerevan you participated in?
Yeah, I knew that I would be moved because the occasion of the 100th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, by definition, is a very moving event and a very powerful experience for all of us. And there was a good quality of scholarship that was presented there, as well as a very impressive representation of diplomats. But there was something I did not expect that was a dream come true for me.
Which one?
And that is that the theme over and over again was remember the Armenian Genocide and remember the genocides of all peoples. And the Armenian Genocide teaches us that and leads us to that. And I am more than delighted and moved. Congratulations and thank you, Armenian people, for reaching that position in a way that few, if any, other victim peoples have yet reached.
Thank you for all the enormous efforts that you have put into this. Thank you very much. Is there anything you would like to add?
A happy life to everybody.